Greetings and welcome back to Old Ways Rising Farm YouTube channel, where I'm waving at you with this week's project. We're getting ready to do a big canvas project using 18-ounce canvas. So I needed to make some tools. That's a pretty mean material to drive a needle through. And the traditional thimble that you use to sew with these heavy materials, as well as thin leathers, is a palm thimble or a sailor's palm. It's called both things. Or sailor's palm thimble, right? Depending on who's writing it down. You can get it, right? If you start looking at pictures of these, they're made a bunch of different ways. Some just have like a little flat piece of metal sewn across, the palm here. Most of them have a stack of leather washers that sheared off at an angle, and then your little piece of metal is attached to that. And then the little piece of metal, which historically was often a flattened out coin, would have divots either pounded into it or drilled into it, just using the tip of a drill bit but not going deep. That way the needle can seat against this and have, be able to register in something and not just slide off to the sides. Okay? And then in use, I have a stack of 4 layers of 18-ounce canvas here, some scraps from the backpack prototyping. You can hold your needle in your fingers against the palm and just drive it right through your material. Okay? And that's, if you've never messed with this stuff, 4 layers of 18-ounce duck canvas is no joke. But it's very convenient to just have this hard surface right in your palm. You don't have to pick it up. It's not stuffed over a finger and giving you all sorts of trouble with dexterity. It's just sitting here so that you can plant your needle against it and sew. It can also do thin leather this way. This is just a little leather scrap from this project. And again, this 3-sided sail needle can just awl right through that piece of leather when you have a good, strong, hard surface to press it against. Okay? Now, part of the reason there's so many different configurations of these is there's different ways to hold the needle. After making this and fiddling with it, I like to hold my needle like this, and my thumb and forefinger in a pinch grip, and then I can support the bottom with my other fingers and line it up good and press. But you can hold the needle with these 2 fingers or with these 2 fingers. But if you're going to do that, you're going to bring it in more square to your palm and push this way. And then you would want more like a flat medallion right across the bottom of the leather there rather than an angled piece. Okay? And that's part of the reason there's so much diversity in these. So you can make this however you want. I am prototyping this in real time. This is not made from a pattern. It's not made from measurements. It's made by taking scraps of leather from other projects, wrapping them around my hand, putting marks where things line up, and then sewing it together. So I'll show you how you do this without need for any kind of pattern right off your own body measurements. So I was just looking through my box of stuff. I'm pretty sure I can just do this as a scrap leather project. Okay, this is why little stuff like this is why I never throw out scraps even that big. Right, you'll find some use for them. And when you're doing projects, even this one we can do entirely with small pieces because all we need is a little bit to wrap around the hand, and it's fine if we make it out of 2 or 3 pieces. But even if you're doing a larger project, you'll need little rings and cutouts and filler pieces and ribs and all sorts of little stuff. So keep these little scraps. We're going to do this out of scraps. And then I looked at my box of bone and antler cutoffs, and I found this little tine. I think it's whitetail. There's non-zero chance it could be a little muley tine, but I think it's whitetail. I don't have any recollection where I got it. It's filtered to the bottom of my box of scraps. But it's a little brow tine. And what first caught my eye is it's got this flat bottom, so it'll be easy to attach to the leather that's going to go across the palm. But then also this angle is just about right. Okay? So if I do this for real, holding that there, and then bring it in to there, okay, that is a very good angle to push forward into the work. Okay? So I might flatten that angle a little bit, but with just a little bit of refining. It's just a little bit of a flare all the way around that I'll take off and maybe make that angle just a little bit shallower. Okay? But for the most part, that's good. And it's got the texture of the pith. Since it's probably whitetail, that pith is going to be hard. It's not going to collapse under force. Okay? And it's just rough enough that it's going to grab the eye of that needle and let me push. So this seems like a perfect piece. And it's even triangular in cross section, so I have, you know, these little natural ribs right where I want to drill in, so I can drill a bunch of angled holes in there and sew it to the leather palm. So we're going to use that for our hard bit. I don't know if I'm going to cut it off and trim this end. I could always do that at a later stage. Right? For right now, I just want to very quickly get, you know, the minimum viable product, right? That's going to get me working on another project, right? And it's kind of cool looking to have that full tine attached. But if at any point that gets in my way, I could just cut the thread, you know, cut the threads and cut it off, finish it a little bit, and sew it back on. Right? Not a big deal. For now, I'm going to leave that, and we'll see how I like it. Now, these are just cut-offs and miscuts. This was a miscut from one of the hatchet sheaths we made a little while back. That's a cut-off from the same project, so is that. And this is just a little strip from the edge. So what I'm thinking, we need a piece which goes across the palm. Okay. And the antler will be attached to, like so. Okay, probably right about there. Okay. We need to kind of sketch a loose design, and then this is going to wrap around the back and get attached to a strap that goes all the way across the back of the hand. But for starters, I kind of want to mark where the edge of my thumb is. Okay. And then between those points, I'm just going to sketch a gentle radius. Okay. Relatively thumb-looking radius. Now, put this back where I want it. And I'm going to want to kind of bring it in here. And, you know, that's actually a good contour. So I'll just bring it right to there. So I'm just going to sketch a line to here and kind of leave a little bit of a rounded bit there. Sew into. And then the same thing here. Okay. Then obviously we'll cut that little bit off. So that will be the first part of the palm. That'll wrap around. This will probably get narrowed till the end of the day, but I'm going to leave it as is for the moment. Okay. Kind of bob that off. We'll just cut this. You need good sharp knives when you're doing leather work. Now, you need good sharp knives when you're doing any kind of work, but thought I'd show all these little steps on this because prototyping on the fly is a thing that you do when you're working on these sorts of projects. Ease that corner just a smidgen. Okay. Does that fit? Yes, that does fit. Okay. There. So there's the first piece. Now, the second piece is we need to wrap some stuff around the back of the thumb, because after pushing the needle through, you need to be able to wrap the thread around the back, hold it, and really pull. Okay? And if you're doing that with heavy twine against your skin, you're going to cut off the circulation and rope burn yourself back there. So we want a raised thumb guard. Okay? And kind of seeing what piece of muskrat will fit. Okay? Just a cone like that is what we're going to be going for. I need to make sure I have enough overlap. I don't think I have enough overlap here. I'm going to cut that off. I'm going to cut this off. Okay. So we think about this being there. Is going to overlap like that. Now, except that angle's going to be bad. What I'm trying to do is just kind of get a general idea of how much material I'm going to need. This is hard to mark on your own body, though. That's fine here. I'm trying to hold that and get my thumb out. Okay. So that's close. Now we don't need anywhere near that much material. I'm going to put a mark here. Just kind of do a little finger gauge around there. Cut this. Let's see how we did. This way. There, coming up around, and meeting there. Yeah, so that's a spot across the back of the thumb that we can catch the thread. So that seems pretty good, right like that. Just want to put a little mark where these are meeting. Kind of mark here. Again, this only works with a pink pencil. Okay. Okay, so that's going to go on the back. And then these two pieces are going to connect across the palm. So I think I like this line pretty well. I'm going to mark that out. that as a straight-ish edge. Straight enough for this. Okay. You can see how we're just working it around and looking at how it fits and making it fit our own body. And it's totally legitimate to prototype things like this. Okay? However, you won't always nail it on the first try. But that's okay, because if you don't nail it on the first try, you now are close to what you're going to need. And we're using scraps, so we're not going to be super worried about wasting large chunks of expensive material. And it's really hard to do this in a material that isn't the real material. Never really works out right. Okay. So now we see with thickness in here, nice. Okay. So that'll work well, because this can line up with that. We will baseball stitch that. It's plenty big for the thumb. And then once that is stitched together, that can get attached in underneath. Okay? So I'm going to go off camera and stitch this, right like that. Okay? And then we will look at this, but the thing I want to do here is we're going to skive the bottom. Taper it in so that when we stitch that, it will be a smoother transition. I just like to do this with my carving knife. You can do this with a sharp woodworking chisel. Or there's official skiving knives that do a really clean job. Okay. So that's skived down. I stitched this up in. Now, it's ugly stitching. Somehow I messed up the baseball stitch pattern. That's fine. It's fine for now. I'll restitch that, but that's a finishing touch. Currently, I just need to continue prototyping and make sure it fits right. There's not too much leather anywhere. There's nothing that's going to be annoying or keep me from moving my hand around. And all of those questions are answered in a positive way, so it fits. But I need to trim some of this nonsense down here. So I'm going to pull that on, and then I'm going to take the antler tine and just hold that in its most natural position. And I'm just going to kind of make a mark here. Again, it has to be a pink pencil. You're just cooked. Okay. So, right there's that line. Now, I don't want to get into my stitching here. So, that's approximate. I'm going to go parallel to that line. Give myself a good amount of space. Okay. Just mark a little line there. I can see that. I don't know if you're going to be able to see that, but this way. Yeah. That's good. So kind of in that about right position, just trace right around it. Okay, we're going to cut that off. Okay, there's a little thumb portion. And, yep, that fits right nicely right like that. Okay, now this is going to go up in there and get sewed together. I've been debating on whether I want to skive that. I think I do some, but I'm not going to get too carried away with this. I'm going to skive it down by half. So it's a more natural transition. But right where all that stitching is, I can't skive that or it's going to get weak. Okay. Will be a little bit less blocky. Trim. I'm going to do just a little bit right there. That'll lay down better. So there's that. Now, this piece, I'm going to go right up in like that. And I'm going to make another just very light pencil mark. Just enough to barely see. Okie doke. I can see there's a little bit I'm going to need to trim in there. The next thing I'm going to do is coming out fairly nice. If I turn it over, see, this is interfering with those bad baseball stitches. So I need to redo those baseball stitches. And then I'm going to physically trim a little bit out right here. Okay. And then rubber cement it all together. And we'll talk about punching some holes and stitching these two pieces together. I just rubber cemented this down to the back to hold it while I sew it. I trimmed a little bit right in there. And I might end up trimming a little bit more of that. But it's just rubber cement, so if I need to pick that off and just cut into it, I can. Okay, it's not going to be a problem. But yeah, we're ready to go, and it fits. Always keep checking as you're going, especially when you're prototyping on the fly. It fits. I have plenty of room to attach this, and it's in a good position. Okay, so we're good. Now, I'm going to do an X stitch across this to trap that edge so that it doesn't want to pick up. Then I'm going to do a straight stitch around the rest of it. So I'm just going to eyeball some stitches, and I'm going to come in. So I'm just going to poke some stitches in with my awl here. It should be adequate for what we're doing. Kind of eyeball the spacing. And I'll keep going along that edge like that. And then here, to catch that edge completely, I'll do it from the back, okay, because I can see where things are here better than on the other side. So we'll poke these stitches through from the back side, okay? Now I'll talk when I'm done with this a little bit more about stitching. I do want to take a minute and talk about the cord that I'm using, and this is some hemp yarn, or not hemp yarn, this is a flax yarn. It's a yarn because it's a twisted single. Now, if you want to strengthen this, there's two ways you can do it. One is you can just double it over and stitch with two yarns at the same time. Okay? Or you can ply the yarn into a twine. Right? While it's a twisted single, it's a yarn. That's what yarn means, is a twisted single. Okay? When you ply it and you have two yarns twisted together, it becomes a twine. When you have two or more twines twisted together, it becomes a rope. right? So that's the actual terminology. So we can twist this into a twine, or we can stitch with 2 singles at the same time. There's advantages and disadvantages to both. Twisting it, plying it into a twine is stronger because it's an extra little bit of twist holding all the fibers together. However, it's also a single piece working as a single piece. So if you have something that's a seam where the 2 edges are going to work against each other like this, okay? If you have doubled singles, it's stronger, or it's more durable long term because you spread out the contact and the abrasion of the cordage versus the leather, okay? Whereas if you have a seam which is going to work a lot and you twist it into twine, it will wear through the stitch hole faster. Okay? But conversely, the twining is stronger in the single piece. Okay? Because of the extra twist. So here I did doubled singles because that's a seam that's going to work. Okay, so that will last longer. Here, I'm going to do doubled singles because the second advantage of doubled singles is it will lay flatter. And since this is going to be pressed right against my hand, I don't want a large bulky seam in that area. When I stitch this in, I'm going to twine it for the strength. Because, turns out, antler's not that flexible. So it's not going to work against the seam. Right? So, here I'll twine it. Here I will, in all of these other stitches, I'm going to just do doubled over singles. We're coming along. We've punched all of these holes, and I did do a little bit of trimming of that little sticky up that ended up in there. Okay, so that's nicer and better. And this is pasted down well with a little bit of the rubber cement. Now, barge cement would be better, but we're not expecting that paste job to last longer than the time it takes me to do these stitches. Right? The stitches are the holding power. That's just a temporary clamp. Okay, so it's not going to be super long lasting, but I don't care. It doesn't need to be super long lasting. Now, I'm going to do this stitching in 2 passes. I'm going to do this little triangle of stitches with a straight stitch, and then I'm going to zigzag over this edge in a second pass. Okay, so we'll go along, tie off, and then come back. Now, before using this is just a raw flax yarn, so it's always good to wax your thread. It helps it stick to itself a little bit better, makes it a little easier to manage, gives it a little bit of lubrication as you're doing your job as well. Okay. So, you can see my 2 strands are now just sticking to each other. And I ran a couple passes on this beeswax block before starting here. So, just, you'll feel it when it starts to feel just a little bit tacky. Okay, and then it's good. You can start anywhere you like, but we want to start on the bottom. Okay, since these are pre-punched holes, we don't need a fancy thimble yet. And I'm going to pull this through, but I'm going to leave enough to tie a good knot when this is completed. Okay, so I'm just going to hold that end down with my finger, and then just stitch with a simple running stitch. A little bit uneven there, that's okay. So you'll see as I go along, since this is a simple running stitch, it's going to be every other hole on top and below, at least initially. So there's our first pass all the way around. You can see skipping every other stitch. But now we're going to go around again, the second pass, then change directions so that we're stitching in between those existing stitches and filling in the stitch pattern. There's the last stitch, filling in the last gap. Just like so. So you have a nice even stitch pattern, and it's basically a saddle stitch with one needle. Okay. Now if we flip it over, the last spot to fill in on the back is going to become our knot. And we're just going to do a simple right over left, left over right, the square knot. Which is just a little bit fiddly with this needle still attached. We can tuck our threads up under one previous stitch. Snip them off. Shake the camera stand. We can do the same back here. So that's waxed, we can twist it together fairly well. Fuzzy on the end. I'm not going to catch both of them, but stick that one on. Being silly. There it is. If I can get the second one in. There we go. You can pull those ends through as well. Snip them. So that isn't going anywhere. Okay? But this little flap can pick up, right? You can see it's just the, again, that glue is just a tack. It's not a permanent fixture, right? It's not going to come apart. Those stitches are holding it, but I do want to trap that edge so it doesn't flap around, catch dirt, and get annoying. So we're going to do another thread. I hope that you're enjoying this content, and if you are, I would love to invite you to join our Patreon page and the community over there. The Patreon and that funding is super important for this channel as well as most YouTube channels. It just takes resources to do these things, to buy materials, to go on trips, to go interview people, to do activities, and we're trying to build and make the channel better in all of those categories. So we're super grateful for everybody who is already there. And if you would like to come and join the ranks of those folks, we have a lot of rewards for the folks who do join on the Patreon. We have a large repository of historic information on traditional skills that have been re-indexed and edited and produced in easy-to-print formats and formats that are easy to put into a page reader. And it's indexed by skill rather than all of the random ways that it was indexed in the past. So you can access what you want. We also have a lot of plans and patterns for various projects, like this shoulder bag that we're going to replicate here soon. The fur stretchers behind me are another example. And all of that library becomes an infinite access resource to you when you join the Patreon at any of the paid tiers, even at $1 a month. If you don't want to join that way, they can be purchased as individual downloads as well. And we're just so grateful for everybody who's there and wanted to invite you. So, hope to see you there. But I also hope you're enjoying this video, which we'll get back to right now. Now, for the crosses, we're going to again start from the bottom in one of the end stitches. It doesn't matter which side or top or bottom line, but we do want to be on the bottom of the piece. Okay. And now, again, just like before, we're going to do every other stitch and go around twice to fill in the pattern. So the rule for the X's is when you're on the top, you stitch across, catty corner, okay? And then when you're on the bottom, you stitch along the line. So we're on the bottom, we're on the flesh side, so we stitch along the line. Now we're on the top, so we stitch across to the opposing hole. Okay, so we're on the bottom, so we stitch along the line. It's going to look really goofy on the first pass. We're on the top, catty corner, opposing hole. Bottom, stitch along the line. Missed my hole. Okay. Now we're at the end, so we're just going to come down. We have an odd number of stitch holes here. 7. Okay. So when you have an even number of stitch holes, you'll end it across. When you have an odd number of stitch holes, you're going to have a bar. Okay. But that's okay. No big deal. Now we turn, and we do exactly the same thing, going in the opposite direction. So now we're stitching across, because we're on the back side. And now catty corner, because we're on the top. And you can see how our X emerges. Okay, so now we stitch along the line. And then catty corner. We get our second X. There, so we have the bar, because we have an odd number of stitches. Our first X and our second X. Stitch across the line, because we're on the back side. And catty corner to make our final X. Pull everything tight. Think I had enough thread? Okay. And now we're at the back. We're one hole away from our starting point. We'll tie and tuck just like before. So here you can see that finished product with the X's, which will now hold down that edge and keep it from flapping around. Okay, and we are well on our way. The next thing that we need is to look at this piece, our little bit of antler. So really all we need to do with this is just flatten it out a little bit. We'll do that with a rasp, just kind of taking off some of the rough edges, a little bit coarse, a little bit of smooth. I prefer to do this with my Farrier's rasp, which is AWOL at the moment. I've got to go find it. But Any rasp or file will be able to deburr a little piece of antler like that. That's just a little bit of tedious sanding with a file. And then I'm going to take a hand drill and drill at an angle, okay, through these two natural flanges in this beautiful antler tine, okay, and we'll make a series of holes along both sides, and then place this on here, and I will take my needle and transfer the locations of those holes by pricking with the needle. Okay, and then we'll punch them and look at sewing this. Now to stitch our antler tine on, we are going to twist this into a twine. So I've done the same as before, just taken a length of thread and split it and gone into the middle. Okay, and you can do this with the needle facing right or left, but you're going to get different directions of twist. So you want to make sure that the forward twist, when you do this, like twisting it away from you, is going to tighten the already existing twist in your yarn. Okay? And if that's true, good. If not, do it the other way. Okay? Either way it'll work. So we're going to spread these out, hold the needle, and just roll my hand down my leg, and then allow it to twist into the thread. Then hold that pinch, do it again, allow it to twist into the thread, hold the pinch at the V, do it again, allow it to twist into the thread, do it again, allow it to twist into the thread, so on and so forth until we reach the end. Now, since our starting material was twisted singles, they're technically a yarn. This is now becoming a twine. If you take two or more twines and twist them together again, you have a rope. When you're in soft fiber land, like if it's wool, everybody's going to call it yarn, regardless of whether it's actually a yarn or a twine. Most of what they sell as yarn in a yarn shop is twine, because it's been had two yarns twined together. Okay, and then when we get to the end, we're just going to tie a little overhand knot, keep it from coming undone, and then feel it, make sure it's nice and even. You can just kind of do this a little bit back and forth. We're not adding or removing any twist, we're just helping the two yarns nestle together and set into a nice smooth twine. And then this is what we're going to stitch the antler on with. Now the trade-off, this is a lot stronger than just stitching with two yarns at the same time. The trade-off is that it's stiffer, it's lumpier, and it's more abrasive if it's an edge that's going to work. But when we think about this antler tine, we don't want that to work at all. We want that to be completely rigid, right? And antler's not flexible. So we shouldn't be working against this to any direct degree, at least not enough to, saw through the leather stitching holes. So that's why we're using singles, doubled singles, when we want it to lay flat or it's a seam that's going to work a lot, and twine when it's a rigid seam. We have our prepared thread. I want to talk a little bit about preparing the antler tine. So I just drilled through this with a drill that's going to easily pass the needle with a little bit of slop, because we're going to have to go through each of these holes twice, and the twine will take up some of that distance as well. And then you always want to make sure when you're drilling in a hard material, if you're going to sew into it, that you ease the edges so they aren't sharp. Okay, bone will make a fairly sharp edge, certainly sharp enough to gradually saw through the twine. The easiest way to do that is to take a slightly bigger drill bit and just kind of twist it a little to ream the edge over. The other way you can do that is if you have a triangular or square uh, bird cage awl, you can take that and do the same thing and then kind of work it a little bit to ease the edges. And I use these on those two holes, this tool on those two holes in particular, because they've got a bunch of protrusions in the way that wouldn't let the drill bit get in and work with it. So I just use the corner of that to ease over those edges. Then we set it where we want, kind of fiddle with it until it feels like that's going to be a comfortable position. Take the needle, poke through the holes just to mark in the leather, and then poke through with our awl. Okay? And when you're poking through with the awl, you want the awl to go through at about the same angle as the hole in the antler. Right? If the hole in the antler is at a 45 and then you poke through at a 90, you're going to have trouble catching on the edges of the leather hole. Okay? So, to start this, it's just going to be exactly the same as all the other sewing that we've done. We're going to use the same stitch pattern as this. I have 5 holes on one side, 4 on the other. It's just kind of how it fell. And just going to go up the hole. Position the piece of antler, go up through the same hole in the antler. Leave a tag in the back for tying off. And then down through. And down through. We're just going to do exactly the same thing. Stitch in one direction, turn, stitch in the other direction. Do that on both sides. We now have the antler tine firmly attached. And the next thing we need to do is extend the wristband. Right, so this is going to go around the back of the hand, and now we need to connect between here and there. Okay, so we're going to attach this, and then once that's attached, then we'll look at this and see where we need to cut and how we need to attach that so it hits at the right angle. Going to do this with a baseball stitch. Again, we're back to a joint that's going to move and work a lot, so we're going to use just doubled singles. And the baseball stitch, the key thing to know is you always go up through every hole. This variant, there's different ways of doing it and showing it. Okay. This variant, we're going to just use a single thread and go through twice like we have been. You can also do it with 2 needles, which is how I usually do it when I'm doing this with leather thonging. But it's just like lacing up your shoes. Okay? And the threads in between are going to become a hinge. So there's the first two pieces, the first point at which they're brought together. Nothing's really held well yet. It's very floppy. I'm going to go down and up the next hole. Okay. Right together so that they're nice butt joint. Down through the groove. Up the next hole. You see how we're getting the zigzag there? Down through the groove. Up the next hole. I wanted to show you this on a nice wide piece. That was really fiddly, so I just did it. Never in a million years would I have been able to do that and keep my fingers free of the camera. So, through the groove, up the next hole. Through the groove, up the next hole. That was a little tight. Some of these tight ones I need a palm thimble to sew. That's okay, I've just been pushing against the wood. Down through the groove, up the next hole. So there's the first pass. Now that just is the basic baseball stitch. I mean, you can see the pattern it makes. But I like to double this. So we're going to keep going. We're going to go down. Now I have to sew down through the groove, okay? And I'm going to put the needle through in between the 2 passes of thread. Okay? And then up. Okay. Now, between the 2 passes of thread, when you do it this way, it makes a series of V's. The advantage to this is it makes a really nice hinge effect with a lot of flexibility in it, if you want to build flexibility into a piece. And it's a butt joint, so you don't have a lot of thickness built up. It's a very convenient stitch to use for these sorts of things. There you can see our pattern, nice and neat, and you can see that double V design when you go one way, turn, go back the other, and double the stitch, doubles the strength. It also keeps it a little bit more flush when this is thick material and not adhered to something. Okay, so now we need to bring this around and attach it to here to make the finished handband. So I'm going to stretch my hand out to its widest dimension, set that there, and grab the pencil and ask my beloved to put her finger right there. There you go. Thank you. Mm-hmm. Put a mark there where it's hitting there. And put a mark here. Okay. Thank you, beloved. Mm-hmm. So now that is where we want to cut. And this will come around and attach just like that. Okay, so I'm going to baseball stitch this in, and then we will look at the finished product. Okay, so we have it finished. And I want to talk a little bit about things I like about it and things I don't like about it. Whenever you're prototyping something, there's going to be stuff you like and stuff you don't, and then if you remake it, you can make those a little bit better, right? So I really like it. In general, I really like how it came out, and I'm not going to change anything about it at this stage until I've spent a couple of projects sewing with it, okay? I did adjust the angle of this antler 3 times. Right, before I got it to line up just exactly how I wanted to, come in with my thumb and forefinger grip, I experimented with a couple of different grips, and every time I experimented with a different grip, I moved the antler, and then I didn't like that either, and I used a different grip and then moved the antler, right? So this is how it fits for my hand, and I like this final position, at least for now. What I don't like about it is the leather's too flexible, okay? So I can very easily pull and flex this a lot, and I wish it was more rigid, okay? I really wish this was a lot more rigid, and that would make it more stable as I'm using it. So, as I said, I'm not going to remake or change anything until I've made a few projects with this. But I do anticipate at some point in the future taking this one apart and making it with a thicker palm leather, okay? I will probably use the thinner leather on the thumb and the back of the hand, because that just doesn't do anything except sit there, right? But this strappy piece from the base of the thumb underneath the hard piece and down around to the edge of the hand, I want that stiffer, okay? So the two ways to do that would be sew something else on top of it and double the thickness, or just use thicker leather. And since I have thicker leather that I use for, you know, a variety of things like welts and stuff, I have that available. So I will probably just remake this at some point in the future with some thicker leather, right? No big deal. But it came out very nicely, and I like it. I really like how this antler worked, how it sews on. It's a nice piece and a very successful project. I'm looking forward to sewing the backpacks with it. So I hope that you enjoyed this, and if you like this sort of project where you can learn how to make things and prototype directly from your own body, I did not pick up a ruler once during this project. I did not pick up a pattern once during this project. I looked at what materials I had at hand, compared them to my body, and marked based on that. And you can make most clothing, most, you know, tools like this. You can make just about most of what you need to make. You can make just like this without needing a pattern, without having that dependency. So if you're enjoying this, go ahead and, you know, subscribe to the channel, because we'll do many more projects like this. The backpack project is the next coming up. And if you wanted to wander over to the Patreon, you'd be most welcome there as well. It really helps out the channel, and we're grateful for our patrons. So, hope you enjoyed this. Hope you'll be back, and we'll see you here next time at Old Ways Rising Farm.